Hello, and welcome back to Public History with Jake and Justin. I'm Jake Wynn, and with me is my co host, Justin Voigthofer. Today, we're stepping out of our usual historical narratives to bring you something a little bit more playful. Think back to your high school days. Yes, I mean the good, the bad, and all those awkward moments as well. And remember those yearbook superlatives? Well, buckle up because today we are bringing that same fun spirit to some of our favorite museums. We're not just talking about impressive collections or iconic artifacts. Instead, we're spotlighting categories like class clown and bucket list museum. It's all in good fun as we explore a different side of these cultural landmarks. If you're enjoying our lighthearted spin on public history, please take a moment to rate, review, and share our podcast. Your support helps us reach more public history buffs and keeps the fun and insightful conversations going. Spread the word and let's keep making history together. So get ready for some fun facts and a few laughs as Justin and I unveil our picks for these museum superlatives. Before we dive into our museum superlatives, let's catch up a bit. Justin, how's everything going on your end? It feels like it's been a long, long time since we've chatted.
Yeah, I would say going good. I think the reason it's been so long is one of us went on a cool trip that I hope to hear a lot about. Spoiler alert, it was not me. It was Jake. That I think is going to be in the episode tonight. So I look forward to talking about that. But other than that, it's good. It's springtime. My allergies are kicking my butt. Thunderstorms are coming over the horizon. So, normal spring in the East Coast.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned thunderstorms. We are in one right now here in not so sunny Frederick, Maryland. So apologies if you hear any loud bangs in the background, any thunder or driving rain, which we have at the moment. So yeah, spring is here, and it also is feeling a little bit like summer as well.
I
So
know.
have
It's
you
the
been
worst.
getting outside and enjoying any of the nice weather?
Yeah, I think this is the time we tell the people, Jake, to hold us accountable. Jake and I signed up for a half marathon in October,
Woo!
so that means I have to start running now. The worst time of the year to start running because it's going to get really hot and I'm just going to be dying each day. So I want to thank Jake for pushing me with this decision. It's going to be great. I don't regret it. I just will regret moments of it.
Yeah, this will be fun. I'm sure it's something we'll talk about in future episodes as we approach it, and then actually run it. But I've done this half marathon before, and it's a real gem. It's quite unique. A good chunk of the race is actually run underground through
I was going to say, why don't you tell him? Why don't you tell him the basis of the half?
yeah, so it's on the abandoned Pennsylvania Turnpike in Western Pennsylvania, right above Breezewood. If you ever driven the Pennsylvania Turnpike or Interstate 70 where it meets the Pennsylvania Turnpike, you'll know the little town of Breezewood that doesn't make any sense where you have to get off the highway. Um, Above that little town is are these abandoned tunnels and kind of the old roadway, and the half marathon follows the abandoned stretch of the turnpike. So it's quite creepy. You need a headlamp to run because some of the tunnels are over a mile long, so you actually can't see light at either end. It's total darkness. It's pretty crazy. And the in addition to it being cool that you're running on this abandoned stretch of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the tunnels themselves actually have a pretty unique history as well that were previously they were built for a rail line that was never actually completed, in part because the tunnels have kind of a sordid history with during their construction of being pretty dangerous to the workers who were working on them. But I have to leave some things to talk about in the future about this race, so we'll
I was
hold
going to
off on
say,
some of the stories.
we'll have a live on location so you can hear Jake talk about this as we're running the half, and then also just hear us progressively run a half marathon as we do it. The first 2.5, 2 hours and 10 minute kind of whatever our pace goal is episode of the public history of Jake and Justin. It'll be great.
Yep, it's that'll be a great new episode type in the future. It's just us running and getting just increasingly sad and out of breath. It'll be great. Y'all will love it. You'll love it. All right, so as we discussed in the intro, this episode is going to be about museum yearbook superlatives. So we're going to dive into 10 topics that we have here, 10 superlatives that we are going to drop our favorite museums or sites that fall into those categories, kind of riffing a little bit off of the idea of like what you see in a yearbook superlative list, like best dressed and class clown. Some of these actually snuck into the final list here. But we're going to dive into this, and Justin and I both have each, for most of these categories, each have one museum or historic site that we are going to talk about and fit into these categories. But we're also really curious what you all think as well. So definitely, if you have arguments with us about this, if you have your own superlatives you want to add, definitely let us know in comments over on YouTube. You can leave it on the Jake Wynn Public Historian Facebook page, where these also appear, these episodes appear, and on winninghistory.com as well. There's a comment section there that you can drop in your thoughts as well. So, Justin, are you ready to dive into our museum superlatives?
Let's do it. And I think we should have got some imaging or something of like, an award sound after we do these, like an unveiling, da-da sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I'll leave that for post, I guess. So the first category Jake and I kind of wrote down was the most innovative exhibits. So this is for the museum that uses technology and creative displays to enhance the visitor experience. When I first saw this, my immediate thought went to the National Museum of the United States Marine Corps. It is right off in Quantico, Virginia, right off of 95. It's been around for a while now, I want to say. I think I went there in like 8th grade. So at least, late 2000s, early 2010s, I want to say, but definitely right around that time is when it was constructed. And this one I was going to put for this kind of category or another one coming up, because it kind of set the standard for showing me that public history could be done in different ways. If you've ever been there before, the museum building itself is beautiful. It is a building that is built basically off of a photo, which is crazy to think. But one of the most famous photos in American history is the Marines raising the flag over Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima. This building is built to look like that. So somehow a building looks like the raising of the flag. And it's hard to kind of picture if you've never seen the building, but if you guys Google the building or if you're driving on 95, you cannot miss it. You're going to say, oh, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. That's exactly what it looks like, even though it's a photo and it's a building, right? It's not a bunch of people raising a flag up in the air. So first off, it's beautifully constructed. The inside of it is super well laid out with the central rotunda and everything. But the thing that makes it the most innovative, and the thing that made it for me kind of rethought how you do interpretation, is each exhibit gallery. There's like pre-World War One gallery, so the founding of the Marine Corps, all the way up until World War One, that has its own gallery. World War One has its own specific gallery for the Marines at Belleau Wood. World War Two has its own gallery for the Marine experience in the Pacific. Then it goes to Korea, then Vietnam, and then after Vietnam goes into modern war. And there is a new, and should have looked this up before I started talking. There's a new kind of segment of it, which is the War on Terror, that has its own kind of unique experience that they're planning. I still don't know if they've opened that up yet. I got to kind of look into that and see. It was kind of delayed due to COVID. But with that, each exhibit gallery has a room that you walk into that puts you in a famous battle or a famous instance of Marine Corps history. So the one I think of off the top of my head is the Korean War experience, because you're walking through, you're seeing a bunch of exhibits on the Korean War. You open a door, you step into a room, and immediately the temperature drops like 30 degrees. And it is to represent the Marines fighting at the Trojan Reservoir during World War II. So you're standing, basically, there's ice around you. They have mannequins of Marines, and those Marines are talking, and there's radio communications, and there's different bullets zipping over your head, and you're sitting there cold, and that puts you in a foxhole in the Trojan Reservoir, in a way. Now, granted, those temperatures are sub-zero. This is probably like 50 some degrees, but it's a marked difference from when you walk in to where you walk out. And those types of experiences, they do that for Korea. They make it the room very hot and humid from Vietnam. The one for World War II is super. It has the one of the better like ta-da artifact reveals of any museum, in that you do a briefing for the landing of um, Iwo Jima. So you're sitting there, you have your little boat number. It's like, all right, hey, we're going to hit the beach, or we're going to do this, that, or the other. You step onto a mock-up landing craft, and there is actual footage taken that day of the landing playing around you. So you see what they would have seen standing in the landing craft. And then you finally hit the beach. The door slowly opens, and you are looking straight at the flag that they raised up over Mount Suribachi in Iwo Jima. So, like, one of the more important or influential artifacts in American history. So, I there's probably more exhibits out there that have more high tech things, that are doing things with virtual reality, that are doing things cutting edge nowadays. I gave the nod to them here because they were doing it 20 years ago, or they were at least thinking of doing that 20 years ago, which I give them kudos to do, because they very well could have done a normal museum where they put things on the wall and exhibits and you walk through and that kind of stuff. But they thought outside the box. And at least for me, it's a very formative museum, because it showed that, yes, museum exhibits don't need to be just dry cookie cutter exhibit with a box and a panel and a sign. You can make people feel like they're there, both with art, with AV kind of stuff, but also temperature, which was just very fascinating for me. So if you ever have the chance to be there, I could spend a lot of time talking about this museum. It is very well done, and they do a really good job, and it's right off of 95 in Quantico, Virginia. So
Yeah.
that's mine for most innovative exhibits.
Yep. I'll also add that that is the first museum I ever experienced with Justin Voidhofer.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we our summer of Fredericksburg 2015, we went there together. And yeah, that was my first time ever going there. It was pretty awesome museum. I would say definitely the temperature piece really adds to the experience of going there. It takes you out of, like, you're out of a museum space and you're somewhere else, which I think was, I had never experienced that in a museum before. So yeah, mad props to them for definitely, like,
Those
thinking
pesky
outside the box.
Marines. Those pesky Marines.
Yep. So my choice for most innovative exhibits doesn't necessarily go to kind of a traditional museum, but it's a place that I really enjoyed going to on a work trip to Louisville, Kentucky in 20. This would be back in 2018. So this is pre-pandemic. I haven't been back yet, so it may have changed, but I would say the one of the most innovative exhibits that I've ever seen using technology and creative displays was the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience in Louisville, Kentucky. Right on kind of Whiskey Row in Louisville, kind of the main street, at the site of basically like a storefront for Evan Williams, where they sell their bourbon there in Louisville, and made a really amazing kind of interactive experience about the history of Evan Williams bourbon, and really the history of bourbon in Louisville and in Kentucky. And just masterful use of video, kind of historical reenactments that are very well done. I'm sure we've all seen historical reenactment or living history footage that is not very good. This had extremely high production values, was also very informative, and taught history of bourbon and the history of Louisville, really, and its connections to bourbon in a really thoughtful way. And as you move through this experience, it felt very high quality, um, recreations of barroom scenes, and really evocative of the bourbon experience in Louisville. So that's going to take my most innovative exhibits. I know it's not a traditional museum. It's very much like a kind of corporate celebration of a brand. But I learned a lot of cool history about Louisville through the process. So that's what I would put as my most innovative exhibit.
I mean,
All right.
introducing alcohol to an exhibit seems pretty innovative to me.
Absolutely, you get a drink at the end too. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. That's not going to be the last time we see a museum like that.
No. There's a theme here. There's a theme here.
So our second category we're going to jump into now is coolest hidden gem. And this is awarded to a museum that is off the beaten path but offers a unique and memorable experience. Justin, what is your coolest hidden gem museum?
I realize it's hard to have a museum that is off the beaten path that is in the downtown of a major metropolitan kind of city. But that's what it is. For me, it's the Soldiers and Sailors Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The official title is the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum. It is right beside the University of Pittsburgh's campus, and it is a building that is stunning, that was built by Grand Army of the Republic kind of veterans post World War II. Pittsburgh's a central hub for a lot of Civil War veterans and Civil War veteran community. I'm sure Jake and Rich and we could have Civil War Pittsburgh come and talk about this hall more. That'd be a great episode in itself. But as you walk through, it is basically the spot that all of these old, what started with World War II veterans, just left their stuff after they left, or after they passed away. They just kind of gave it to the museum, and it started accruing artifacts and stuff then. The building itself has a little bit of history. It is used as a lecture hall. You have photos of big GAR kind of reunions there. It was used in the filming of Silence of the Lambs, which was kind of a fun little modern day twist on it. But as you walk through the hall, there's plaques to a bunch of different Pennsylvania units who fought in the Civil War. But it doesn't end at the Civil War. This turned into a memorial hall for any veterans in Western Pennsylvania. So it goes all the way up to the present day and has some really, really amazing artifacts, very local artifacts, because when these veterans either were passing away or thinking about what they wanted to do with their stuff, they decided to give it to the hall. So there is many more in there. There's symbolism of the entire building, how it's built, the different types of kind of symbology in the rooms. And I mean, heck, they have stained glass windows of every different United States Army Corps during the Civil War and all of their different Corps badges with the battles that they fought at, which I thought was super cool. The Gettysburg Address is plastered up on the main kind of auditorium where they do a bunch of speeches and events. And yeah, we were able to walk in. We walked around. We were the only ones there. It was a hidden gem because you felt, at least when we were there wasn't a whole lot of folks there. You felt like you had the whole building to yourself. It was just a big closet full of really, really cool artifacts from a bunch of different places and a bunch of different local Western Pennsylvania history. So that's my off the beaten path kind of museum, the hidden gem, if you will. It's the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Jake, what about you?
All right. So for those of you that know me, probably you're going to be like, really, Jake? You're going to talk about a place you worked. But I have to go with the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office Museum in downtown Washington, D.C. I did work there from 2018 to 2021. But it is a place that is near and dear to my heart. And I would love for more people to experience that museum. It is managed by the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. They operate this site. It's on 7th Street. It's about 4 blocks from the National Mall on 7th Street in downtown DC. And it is the Civil War era home of Clara Barton. It was a kind of an apartment building, a boarding house where she lived from 1861 through 1867 or 1868. And it's where Clara Barton was her home base during the Civil War. So she's going out onto the battlefield and becoming one of the first battlefield nurses in American history. This is the apartment that she would come back to, the boarding house room where she stored supplies, and basically became known as the angel of the battlefield. This is where she came and rested after that experience at places like Antietam. And then I think even more fascinating and less well known about Barton after the Civil War, she spearheaded efforts looking for missing U.S. Army soldiers, and that office was located in this building on 7th Street in downtown D.C. She operates that from 1865 to 1868. Then and helps find about 22,000 missing Union soldiers before she closes up the office, and then ultimately is on a trajectory to becoming one of the most famous humanitarians in American history, founder of the American Red Cross, and does a lot of amazing work and is still inspiring humanitarians today. The building itself also tells the museum tells the story of how that whole Clara Barton connection was lost to history, and the building was almost torn down in the 1990s. But a gentleman named Richard Lyons, who worked for the federal government, he has since recently passed, but he found a bunch of artifacts connected to Clara Barton, including an office sign that said "Missing Soldiers Office" in the attic of the building that was slated to be destroyed. And he basically went on a personal mission to save the building, which was successful. The building has since been renovated. It has stores and offices throughout, and then also has the Missing Soldiers Office Museum. So they do a great job of interpreting that story. You can go on a tour through the historic rooms. They've been restored to their 19th century appearance. It's a pretty cool place, and you'll hear a story tied to one of the most famous women in American history and her experience during the Civil War era. Some things about, even if you know a lot about the Civil War, some stories in there that you most likely haven't heard of before. So definitely worth checking out. And I would say it's a pretty cool hidden gem.
I also would highly recommend going there, only because I'm biased because Jake showed me around there one time and it was super cool. So I don't know if you guys are going to have as great of an experience as I did, but I'm once again a little bit biased. But with that, the next category we have, drum roll please, is Best Architectural Marvel for the museum whose building is as iconic as its collection. So this is the one that I said I thought about for the National Museum of the United States Marine Corps, just because of the way they designed the building. But more thinking of it, I associate this with actually the visitor center at the Battle of Waterloo. It is the Waterloo Visitor Center. If you ever go there, the reason why it is an architectural marvel for me, I don't know if it's as iconic as its collections, but it's an architectural marvel for me because they built it entirely underground. And this building is huge. It's about the size, I would equate it to like the Gettysburg National Military Park Visitor Center, but bigger. Imagine taking that entire experience, going to like the field where Pickett's charge occurred, and then just burying it. And then that is where the museum is. You walk through it, you go, and it's fascinating how you progress through it because you go to the far, like the lowest point, and then you walk. There's an upward trajectory that you walk all the way back up to get to the top where like the lobby is. As you're walking that, like the way they design the building, they talk about and the French Revolution. They talk about how we get there, but then they also kind of march you to Waterloo. I remember this one part of the museum that on either side of you they have mannequins that are in march formation, every different uniform kind of represented for the armies that fought there, both the French and then the Allied army, which I didn't know until I went there was actually majority Europeans and not Englishmen. I thought it was an English army, fought, the Duke of Wellington, all that kind of stuff. In that army, though, you have Germans, you have obviously the English, you have some Dutch, you have like a bunch of different other nationalities that form the Allied army that fights Napoleon there. But you walk with them to Waterloo. There's the battlefield itself. There's an interactive exhibit within it. It, like, if I recall correctly, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it like puffs smoke out at you as like a cannonball was flying across the screen or something, but not in a hokey way, like in a way that actually kind of felt kind of cool. I guess cool is not the right way to put it. Felt different. But then, yeah, you come all the way back up to the top. And then once you're standing on one side of the Waterloo battlefield, you can look out back towards the museum. And you don't see the museum. You see this giant mound that was created post-war that there's a lot of controversy for. Because I guess, long story short, it was put up by I guess he ended up being the king of the Netherlands, where at that time, the king of the Netherlands, or who became the king of the Netherlands, I'm butchering the history here, was wounded at, so they built this giant lion statue that completely wrecks the battlefield. So that wrecked the battlefield, but the museum did not. So it's a fascinating kind of place to be. That's kind of, blew my mind that it was entirely underground, but kudos for them. Definitely worth the visit if you ever make it over to Europe, if you're ever up in Belgium in that kind of area. Definitely worth your stop to visit the Waterloo Visitor Center. So that's it for me. Kind of not, I don't know if that's what we were going for with that, Jake, but looking at yours, I feel like yours is what probably I should have answered at, but I'll let you kind of talk about it.
Yeah, I would go with the National Building Museum in DC for this. Kind of I think answers this sort of twice. It's both a stunning architectural piece of the nation's capital in Washington D.C., but it is also telling the story of architecture and design and buildings. And this museum, if you've not been to this museum on a trip to the nation's capital to D.C., you must go. It is one of my favorite museums. Again, the National Building Museum, not far away from our last site that I mentioned, the Missing Soldiers Office, and again, like 4 blocks from the National Mall, close to the Capitol. And this building, architecturally, is constructed in the late 19th century for use as the United States Pension Bureau. So this is where Civil War soldiers, the families of soldiers who were killed during the Civil War, this is where they applied to get a pension. From the federal government in the decades following the Civil War. There are amazing kind of statues built into the side of the building all the way around this kind of a large red, really bright red structure. And it depicts different scenes from the Civil War, soldiers marching, cannon crews, cavalry, that sort of thing around the side of the building. And then you go inside, and it is this vast, cavernous space that has these massive marble columns. And then, kind of ringing the space are these different levels where the different pension offices were when the building was originally constructed, and that's what purpose it served. But now the National Building Museum's been in there for several decades, and it tells the story of kind of architecture and design around the world. And they have some just amazing exhibits that they've done, some on history, some that are more of an art focus installations. Presently, I pulled up their current exhibits. I have not seen the current exhibits, but they have displays about Frank Lloyd Wright, who will appear
We will
again.
talk about him.
Um,
Gosh.
and we've got one about kind of building stories, which is about for kids and adults, kind of an immersive exploration of architecture and design. Brick City, which is all about iconic architecture with being built at a miniature level with Legos by an artist. I remember one that they did, like they made like a whole beach scene that people could go and you could like lay on this like recreated beach inside this vast building. It was really cool, a lot of fun. I would say it's probably the architectural marvel that I first think of when I think of a museum. Just because the building itself is really cool, an architectural marvel itself, but it's also telling the story of architecture around the world as well. So that's my architectural marvel. We'll move on to our next category for best use of space. And this is for a museum that creatively utilizes its space for exhibitions and visitor flow. Justin, what is your museum for this category?
Yes, I immediately thought of the Udvar Hazy Air and Space Smithsonian branch near Dulles Airport. It is a museum that is its own aircraft hangar, and it's basically the way I describe it to people. It is the museum that all of the cool big stuff that they can't take apart and put down in town in DC, they put in this big aircraft hangar. And the reason why I say it has the best use of space is because the way you walk into the building, you park at the parking lot, you walk up some stairs, and then as you enter the building, you go up some more stairs. And when you get to the platform and you kind of get to the top of the stairs and are in the building and looking straight ahead, the first thing that greets you is the front end of the SR-71 Blackbird, which is the coolest airplane ever designed, ever. I'm an airplane nerd, and like that plane and what it can do and the stories about like how it operated is just amazing. So it is standing there looking straight at you, and then over its shoulder, kind of behind it, which you can see because the plane itself, the SR-71, is super thin because it went so fast. It can't be super bulky. But behind it is the space shuttle. Is a space shuttle. I actually should look it up. I can't remember, Jake. Do you remember which one? Is it Discovery or is it? I'd have to look that up. I'll kind of look it up and see it. Once again, probably should have known that before talking about it. But you have the SR-71 looking straight at you, and then you have a space shuttle behind it. And you can walk all the way up to the space shuttle, be within 4 to 5 feet of it. And every time I go up and kind of walk around the space shuttle, it's always just kind of crazy for me to think like, oh yeah, like that was in space. Like that flew multiple missions to space, flew up and down, came back and landed, all that type of stuff. And I don't know, it's just so cool. The nerd in me, Jake, I think this show, like, we need to put in the description. We talk about space a lot because now this is like the sixth straight episode I feel like we've talked about space,
Yes, we love
in one
space.
form or another, whether that be eclipses or anything else going on. But yeah, the Udvar Hazy Center is super cool. I didn't even get to the most probably famous plane in that entire building, which is the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the atomic bomb. There's a reason it's out there. That's a podcast in itself that Jake and I are sure we could talk about, because that plane was supposed to be downtown in DC, but there's a reason why it's out there, and I don't even want to get into that right now because it's such a complicated story. But it's there. You can go visit it. You can go look at it. It's the plane that ushered in the atomic age. One of the two, I guess, Boxcar, or not Boxcar, but the plane that dropped Boxcar, the bomb, who was on Nagasaki, is out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. So Enola Gay is the first one, though. It is there. And I guess, I don't know. I'm a big plane nerd. I love planes as a kid. And I just love this museum as the best use of space because it is so big, but yet it still sets you up for one of the best entrances to any museum I've been to. So that's mine for that spot. Jake, what about you?
Yeah, so mine's going to go up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Eastern State Penitentiary. It is an old prison, and was left to become basically a ruin when it's abandoned in the kind of mid 20th century. And then it is transformed into a museum. And museum tells the story of Eastern State Penitentiary, but also tells the story of incarceration in America and its history going back to the early days of Eastern State, which is one of the first of the kind of penitentiary style that you see built in the 19th century. So it does an amazing job of telling the story of the prison itself, but then telling the story of the prison system across the United States and its development, and what's wrong with it as well. Talking about the social issues around prisons, around incarceration of people, and I think for best use of space, it's the fact that they did just preserve it as a ruin, and you're walking through this building that has been stabilized, but is basically, I mean, it's been abandoned. And so it feels very kind of oppressive, pretty creepy. Some areas of it are borderline disturbing. I would think of the hospital that's preserved within the prison walls. But in addition to the space being pretty cool to experience, and you learn a lot about the prison and the inmates who were kept there, you also, I would highly recommend getting the audio tour. This may have changed since my time. I hope it didn't. I visited this before the pandemic. But the audio tour was like Steve Buscemi narrating
No
each of the
way.
scenes. And it's just so well done. I think it's the best audio tour. We don't have that in the category here, but the best audio tour I've ever experienced was that one. But if you have not, I feel like I'm saying this for every category. If you've not experienced Eastern State Penitentiary, I know it's not like super positive, experience to go. I want to go visit an old prison, but it's worth it. Trust me, you'll have a transformative museum experience if you go there. Definitely worth going when you go to Philadelphia. Justin, back over to you
Yes.
for our next section.
Well, yeah, Jake says, if you don't want to go to something like Eastern State Penitentiary, then the next category is for you. Most likely to make history cool. This is for the museum that excels at making historical content engaging for all ages. Now, I realize now after I read that, the all ages thing would probably negate my nomination for here, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that is the American Prohibition Museum in Savannah, Georgia. Not really for all ages. Well, all ages can go through it. They just can't enjoy the full museum experience. But it talks about prohibition and kind of the coming of temperance in the United States, the impact it had on cities like Savannah, the kind of underground nature of speakeasies and gin running and all of the different things we hear, organized crime. and you kind of walk through it. You go through Prohibition, and it's not the exhibits themselves aren't very detailed. It's more of just kind of like a fun experience to go through. You'll see a bunch of photos. You'll get some kind of context behind some things. The reason why I think it is the most fun museum, or most coolest museum, is because as it goes through, you walk through the museum. It's very interactive. With your ticket at the end, you knock on a door. The door opens up. You walk in, and you yourself are in a speakeasy. You walk up to the bar, and you can order any drink that you want. Um, Mostly any drink that you want from the bartenders, and they will make it in front of you, serve it to you, and you can have a cocktail in a speakeasy in Savannah. So super cool. Love it. The bartenders are great. When we went through it, there's also, if you're ever in the Savannah area, you don't even need to go through the whole museum experience. You can just walk up through kind of a separate stairway and go to the speakeasy itself. So just bypass the whole museum and just go straight to the bar. And what's fun about that is the bartenders very knowledgeable about like mixology, right? So you can go in and be like, hey, I really like bourbon and I like this. And they'll make you a drink and kind of tell you the name of the drink. And the kind of a little bit of the history behind the drink. They do make your own cocktail classes. So it's a very interactive public facing museum in that it's not just, or put up exhibits and stuff, but we're also going to enjoy prohibition kind of culture and speakeasy kind of culture and mixing drinks and that kind of stuff. So very, very cool. If you're in Savannah, super recommend the American Prohibition Museum just for a really fun time. And history doesn't have to be boring. That museum caters to anybody, I feel like, because no matter what you are, you'll have fun in that museum, whether that's being with friends, seeing the history, or just having a good drink with good company. So that's mine for making history most cool. But yeah, Jake, how about you? I know your answer, which is funny because I just talked about it in a way.
Yeah, so I think some similar themes running through this one. So I would say most likely to make history cool, to me, is the National Air and Space Museum, the one on the Mall in downtown DC. And I think of this, I was thinking of it as being the kind of the engaging for all ages. As was a former museum professional working in the vicinity of the mall and all of the amazing museums in Washington. And you see a lot of families coming in to visit, to have the cultural experience of visiting the nation's capital, going to the Capitol building, maybe going to the White House, checking out all of the museums on the mall. And I always see the kids that are just kind of like they're dragging a little bit. They're a little overwhelmed. They're seeing a lot of things. They may not be interested in history. But this museum, the Air and Space Museum, is kind of always the one that you see kids get very excited about. And it's because of airplanes, space, the technology. And this is a museum that has been undergoing some renovations as well. It had some very dated exhibits that are now being modernized. It's been a years long project to update the Air and Space Museum. So this is one for me that makes history cool for all ages and interests because it crosses a lot of different lines. The technology piece, the aircraft, the spacecraft, just some cool technology on display, telling some history that's not, built around some historical documents or people who lived hundreds of years ago, but it's something that's very real. You can see it, you can touch it. And I've seen this in person make people who say they don't like history be like, nah, it's a pretty cool museum. So that would be my selection for most likely to make history cool. Our next category for class clown. I think I'm flying solo on this, Justin,
Yeah,
unless you came up with anyone in the meantime.
no, I it was so hard for me to think of this as, humor as part of the exhibits. Yeah, I couldn't really think of things. And once Jake told me his, I was like, no, you go ahead with that one because that is a great answer. So Jake, what is your answer to class clown as
Yes.
museum and historic sites that use humor as part of their exhibits or marketing?
Yeah, so I'm gonna give huge credit to James Garfield National Historic Site out in Ohio. I visited this site, had the opportunity to give a presentation about the assassination of James Garfield and the medical response to that assassination out there. And the team there does an amazing job. If you're gonna visit a presidential house, I highly recommend going there because the history of James Garfield. His story is amazing, should be more known. But the team there, they do an amazing job of telling the story of James Garfield, and they do it a lot of times through humor. If you there's one museum on this list that is a like must for social media follow, it is the James Garfield National Historic Site, because they are funny. They do a great job of making history very relevant and fun and making connections to today. They just posted, as of our recording just a few days ago, tagging Chris Pratt, the actor, because he was on Jeopardy. And they were offering him $250 because he was asking a question about James Garfield. They tag Chris Pratt, and they're like, we would love if you could narrate our new film. We can give you $250 and a T-shirt to come and do it. We'll wait for your call. And I was just like, that's just a fun way of interacting with, in this case, a celebrity, but also just showing that, history doesn't need to just be, historic sites don't need to be kind of, pretty bland or just telling the history. They can be engaging as well. And I think James Garfield National Historic Site falls into the category of class clown, but they're doing it for a great cause and to promote a wonderful, wonderful museum that y'all should go and visit the next time you're in the Cleveland area of Ohio.
Right. Go there, and then also the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes, another great
Which I've never been to. Have you been to?
I have been in the lobby. I have not been in the actual Hall of Fame itself. I'm not much for a Hall of Fame. I'm not a Hall of Fame like fanatic, I will say. I've not been to any Hall of Fames actually. But I will
then
say,
how do you know? Maybe you are. You need to go next time.
That's true. Baseball Hall of Fame is like it's not actually on my bucket list later on, but it is one of the places that I'd most like to go that I haven't been to yet.
Yeah.
All right, number 7, most likely to get lost in.
Yes.
And this is probably not what you're thinking. This is for the museum with the most confusing layout or the least helpful navigation aids. Justin, what is most likely to get lost in museum?
I'll start by saying the folks here do an amazing job. They do an absolutely amazing job, and it is actually part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So I'll come in hot with the palliate, the compliments. But it's the Falling Water house, the Frank Lloyd Wright construction in Western Pennsylvania, that is built over top of a waterfall. The reason why it is the most likely for me to get lost in is the layout of the house. I am not a Frank Lloyd Wright aficionado. Maybe there's a rhyme or reason to it. I just remember being in there, being super claustrophobic and not knowing how to navigate the house. Because it is, and if you've seen the house before, if you haven't, you can Google it. It is a beautiful outside of the building, but learning more about it, you realize while it may be beautiful on the outside, it was not built for people to live in. It was built as this art piece, really, as a house. The roofs are flat. They always leak. It almost fell into the water. It took a graduate student who, basically, they're cantilevers. If you go there, you're going to hear the term cantilever, which are two kind of floors over top of each other that are anchored in on one side, so that the weight and the physics of it allow you to kind of put weight on it. For the longest time, they have not even a yardstick. It's just a little bit bigger than a yardstick, but it's a stick. Well, I guess it's over 6 feet tall because I could stand in there. But it's this stick that they would take to the center of the living room, and they'd put it in the center of the living room, and it would show that the two kind of levels, they weren't going apart or coming closer together. They were staying the same. So for the longest time, Falling Water was like, oh, cool, the house is still maintaining exact how it's supposed to be built. What they didn't know is both of those levels were actually falling towards the waterfall at the same rate of speed each year. So a graduate student kind of looked into it and said, hey, if you don't do anything, this beautiful house is going to fall apart and fall into the creek that it's built over top of. They figured it out. They constructed it. They rectified kind of the structure side of it. But that goes to show you that, once again, Frank Lloyd Wright houses, while they may be beautiful, probably aren't really built to live in. At least this one isn't. And I just, yeah, I'm super claustrophobic. I mean, I'm a taller guy. I will admit that. I'm like 6'1". So for me, like I had to duck through every door. Like I just was cramped as I was walking through the hallways. Um, Very confusing layout for me. Didn't feel comfortable at all while in it, but that's just me. It's beautiful on the outside, has a great nature conservancy around it. Well worth your time to walk around the trails because it is a scenically beautiful. But just yeah, the house itself for me was very, very confusing.
Yeah, that's it's a definitely a must visit. Um, but I'll be honest, I won't ever go back. Uh,
That's once again, there's I'm sure they are great people out there. I actually talked when they were getting the UNESCO World Heritage kind of nomination getting together is when I was in grad school at WVU, and one of the folks came down to talk to us, and she was fantastic. Once again, yeah, great place, but yeah, Jake, I'm with you. It's glad it checked it off the box. Cool. Don't really plan on heading back there anytime soon.
yep. So for mine for this, it's a recent museum visit. And this for me is the Harley Davidson Museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which I will also preface this. Very cool museum, great exhibits. However, I wandered quite a bit around this museum without knowing exactly where I was supposed to go next. It is a vast building, part of the Harley Davidson complex in Milwaukee. um, Probably a little bit in the defense of the museum. There was an event going on that I was participating in, and there was a little bit of alcohol being served, and I may have had a few drinks. And so that may have been part of my navigational issues of getting around the museum. But one of those cases, and I'm sure all the listeners out there probably have had these experiences of going into a museum and not knowing exactly where you're supposed to start, where you're supposed to go, what the natural flow of the museum is. And this is one of those cases where it just wasn't super clear where you were supposed to start, how you're supposed to navigate through the museum, how you navigate the different floors, where you're supposed to go next. Just one of those kind of a little more confusing of a place to navigate. But like I said, in defense of the museum, I also had a few alcoholic beverages while we were doing it. But the actual, I don't have an interest in motorcycles, but the history of the evolution of motorcycles was really fascinating. They did a really good job of laying out that history through the last century. So definitely worth a visit. But I didn't have a map of the museum. That may be the way to navigate that museum on a normal non-evening special event visit to that museum.
That is very fair. With that, we'll move to the next category, which is most likely to haunt your dreams. This is for the museum that with exhibits so impactful they stick with you long after you visit. Now, as I thought about this, there wasn't any other answer in my mind. It is, and it's. I'm gonna kind of cheat because it's not really a museum, but it is. It's a ossuary, which is basically a big I don't know how to describe it more than it's a giant building in the battlefield of Verdun over in France, and it contains um, the skeletal remains of over 130,000 unidentified combatants from both Germany and France who fell in the battlefield of Verdun during the First World War. The reason why it sticks with you is it's this giant kind of grand Gothic almost ish looking building that has a light on top of it that is a flashing red, white, and blue light that kind of just flashes all the time throughout the evening and day too. You can't see it during the day, but at night it's saying they call it the, what do they say? The light of the lantern of the dead, which shines on all of the battlefields throughout Verdun. But the reason why this is super haunting is that it shows you the impact of war in that, like I said, there are 130,000 skeletal remains of the combatants in the building, which you can see. They have windows that come up to your knee. And if you bend down and peek through the window at the bottom part of the ossuary, you see these skeletal remains, bones upon bones, skulls upon skulls of hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were killed during World War One, and just their bodies and bones dumped and deposited inside of that building. It is frightful. It sticks with you. It is very different. How the kind of France remembers their dead is much more bleak than we do in the United States. This would never fly in the United States. Nothing like this would ever happen in the United States. And it is part of French culture and part of what they went through during Verdun. That battle was so terrible and so awful. Um, People, and myself included, used to give France a hard time about, oh, surrendering, they don't know how to fight. No, if you walk through this battlefield and you walk through this memorial, you're going to understand why they do not want to fight ever again because of how horrific their experience was at Verdun. So this museum sticks with me. I think about it often for whatever reason. I don't know why I think about it all the time, but I will always kind of go back to kind of feeling almost like your skin crawl because you're looking at men and maybe even a few women who were killed, and then their bones just deposited, no other grave, no other knowing who they are. And yeah, it's just sad to me. It's just super impactful, very moving. And that, yeah, there's no other answer for me about kind of sticks with me because man, that being able to bend down there and just see that is, makes my got goosebumps right now thinking about it. It's ridiculous. In like a crazy, weird way, I guess. So yeah, you're not going to find that anywhere else besides there. I guarantee it. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, so we're going to move from the First World War to the Second for me. This is another recent visit for me. I went to the Imperial War Museum, one of the sites in London during a visit earlier this year in 2024. And I would say it's going to go specifically to one exhibition within that museum, and that is the Holocaust exhibit at the Imperial War Museums. This was still sticking with me. I think having seen numerous exhibits about the Second World War, museum exhibits about the Second World War and the Holocaust around the country and around the world, this is one that definitely stood out to me, in part because the mood setting in each of the rooms of the exhibition were so unique, and the soundtrack, the lighting, the music they played, the ambient noise they utilized was created a chilling experience of going through. To be in a room with a lot of artifacts tied to the rise of the Nazis and the kind of Hitler cult and the Hitler Youth, and there's artifacts connected to that, and then there's also the kind of sounds of boots marching, the sounds of speeches, and then also some of the music that the kids are singing in, and it's playing in this kind of just chilling soundtrack that's playing in the background. And then you move to another room and it's the beginning of the Holocaust, and it's these massacre sites in Eastern Europe, and it's just the ambient noise of waves on a beach in the Baltic, or birds chirping, and a woodpecker in a forest in Ukraine, and just this. It was very moving in that it was disjointed, and it took you on this journey through kind of sound and video that didn't necessarily, it was different than a lot of other experiences I had going and learning about and visiting a museum exhibit about this subject matter. And it was very, I'd say, from the music standpoint, the sound that they were using was very reminiscent of a film was coming out at the same time, Zone of Interest, about the commandant of Auschwitz and his family, that used sound in a very similar way to this museum exhibit. So it was all kind of mashed together for me, and one that made me think a lot differently than I had about the Holocaust, about the rise of fascism. It was a very impactful museum experience, and one that I've been thinking about a lot in the months since I visited. I would definitely, I'd say this is like the same thing I'm saying about each of these museums. Worth a visit the next time you're in London. Go and check this particular exhibit out the next time you're there.
Yeah, that will affirm another answer of mine, which is nice because yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But with that, the next one is the Lifetime Achievement Award for a museum that has significantly contributed to public history over many years. And Jake and I think we're going to disagree about this one. But not really disagree. I think we have different opinions, not even opinions, just different points bringing up about this museum that I'm going to nominate, which is the Smithsonian United States History Museum, or the I forget the official name, Jake. Do you even Museum of American History? I think
Yeah, I think it's
Smithsonian Museum of American History.
Smithsonian National Museum of American History.
Yes, maybe that's a knock on it that I don't even know the name of it. But with that, I saw Jake beforehand. I just remember going to this museum as a kid, and the actual exhibits in this museum are very impactful. I mean, they have some of the best just single exhibits, artifacts, I should say, not even exhibit artifacts that you'll find kind of around the country because this is still the Smithsonian. They usually have pretty good stuff. But the thing that I thought of as a kid when I was 4 or 5 or 6, maybe going to DC for the very first time, we're on the mall, it's hot, it's sweaty, you're walking around. My favorite TV show growing up, and still one of my favorite TV shows of all time, is MASH. And I remember going through and seeing the set, seeing the famous signpost, seeing the swamp, which is the tent that Hawkeye and BJ, the main characters, kind of live in. Um, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was so I still can picture, I still can think of it as a kid, seeing that and kind of freaking out and geeking out. Probably one of the very first times for a history exhibit or for seeing something. But I think that this deserves this award only because it has all of the heavy hitters. It has the original Star Spangled Banner that Francis Scott Key wrote the poem about. It has Judy Garland's Red Ruby Slippers. It has let me think about from Civil War. It has the furniture that was in the home where Lee and Grant kind of surrendered in April of 1865. I can go on and on and on. I'm sure I'm missing some, probably another one of the big things to think about. But I mean, it is, I don't know. I think it should get this award just because the amount of people who only go to one history museum probably in their entire lives and go to that one see a lot and see America, and it's a lot. There's so many different kind of things and strands, and it's hard to kind of figure out what a one kind of perspective of that museum should be. So that's me prepping the defense, prepping the audience for Jake. Jake, what are your thoughts on the Smithsonian Museum of American History?
Yeah, I feel like this could be a whole episode itself. The development of that museum and its evolution over time. I am not a fan of that museum. I'm not a fan of the American History Smithsonian. It's not my favorite museum. I always go back to talking about the thing that just confused me so much when I went there, I guess, while I was in college, probably my second or third time there, and I'm looking at the food exhibit and just a wall of fast food lids for cups and their evolution through time, sponsored by McDonald's. And I was like, why is this here? And why is this a part of this museum? And it's those little things like that, those little like knickknacks, tchotchkes, small things that, were really important to somebody who donated them or who funded an exhibit that appear in that museum that always throw me off. And I think I'm inclined to not like it as much because it's trying to tell the whole story of America in one building, and it's a task that will never could never be done. I think in a way that would please everyone. And there's always going to be something missing. There's always going to be different takes on the way exhibits are constructed or put together, or the narratives within them. So I it's not my favorite place, I will say. I do agree with you though that there's some individual artifacts there that are amazing. I go immediately to the Civil War and to a place that's near and dear to my heart. And we had a previous episode of the podcast while you were out about Spotsylvania Courthouse. They have the famous tree at the bloody angle that was shot down, just knocked over by the fact that it was struck by so many bullets and shells over the course of the fighting there in May of 1864. Like, that is one of the coolest artifacts I've ever seen, and connected to a place that really is important to me. But from a looking at the museum as an entirety, in its entirety, not my favorite in particular. I will give my lifetime achievement award to a museum just across the street from the National Museum of American History. I give the award to I would nominate the National Museum of African American History and Culture as my museum for this category because um, still having visited probably hundreds of museums at this point in my life, having worked in museums, this remains my favorite museum that I've ever been to. The way that it is designed, its location, just next to the, right on the wall, on the mall, between the Washington Monument and the White House, the design of it, the fact that you have views in that museum of all of the different historic sites, monuments along the National Mall, and then the content within and the artifacts are just remarkable. And the way that the museum, the history portion of the museum, kind of broken out from the different cultural pieces within the museum, the way that the story is designed, the way the exhibits are laid out, the narrative that is shared in that museum is, I think, just incredibly, incredibly well done with care to all of the communities from which those artifacts were brought, from the communities that those stories are derived from and have arrived at that museum, from all over the United States, really not just the United States, some other areas around, especially from the colonial period, and the arrival of slavery in America. It just a very, very well done museum, and also has some amazing food for a museum as well, built into the fabric of that entire museum experience. I would give it, that is the one museum in DC. I would say, if you're not going to go to any other museums, I would say go to that one. If you're going to choose one museum, go to that one because it is so well executed. The way the story is told, the history that is told there, it is world class, and I think one of the best museums in the world that I've experienced. I would say that one gets my lifetime achievement award. That's who I would nominate for sure.
Yeah, that's super cool. I am ashamed to say I have yet to be able to still make it there. Every time I go, I don't know if they're still doing the ticketing thing, but when I would try to go, I guess a testament to how great it is, they would always have all their tickets sold out. So are they still, registering your time through tickets, or if they kind of past that now?
Yeah, tickets are still they're still doing that system, but it's definitely a lot easier to get a ticket than it was in the first couple of years. So, but definitely plan that trip in advance because they do limit it, the amount of people that can go through, in part because of the way that the museum is designed. It does not lend itself to being absolutely swarmed with people the way some of the other museums on the mall are designed.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, heading into our last category now, the last one, we're almost there. Fitting the bucket list museum. So the museum that you want to get to before we kick the bucket. Jake has been to it, so I'm super jealous, super jealous. But mine is the Imperial War Museum over in London. The amount of just good material that they put out, their archives I know are fantastic, but also I just love the way they structure kind of their exhibits. I love kind of some of the things that they try to do. One being the Holocaust exhibit that Jake had mentioned. I want to try to get over there. Hopefully that exhibit isn't going anywhere. I don't think it is. But yeah, that's definitely a bucket list museum for me, is the Imperial War Museum in London. Jake, you also, this was number 2 on my bucket list, so I'm glad you put it there.
Yeah, mine is the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. That's top of my list. I have never been to New Orleans. It is a place that I desperately want to get to. So much history, so much to see, so much culture, food, drinks, music. It has it all. It also has this museum as well, a huge complex that I am very excited to explore in the future. It would be my probably, there's a long list of bucket list museums. This is the one, at least for today, that is at the top of that list.
I almost put them for most innovative, but I felt like because I hadn't seen it, I can't do it. But they are using AI to have a room where you can have a conversation with a World War II veteran, which is the coolest thing ever. I mean, absolutely super cool. If you Google it, look it into, you'll see the kind of the exhibits and how they're building it. But yeah, that is, talk about innovative. Like, you're able to sit down there and have a conversation with somebody who is no longer with us. Like that is, I think, super cool in keeping the history alive in an innovative way. So that was another nomination. But like I said, I feel like I can't nominate it because I've never been there. So that's why bucket list number two.
All right. So we're going to leave this section behind now. We're going to head towards our conclusion. So we're leaving behind the yearbook like museum superlatives and transitioning now to one of our favorite segments that we do. We like to call it Postscript. This is where Justin and I share something from our past week that really made an impression on us, something memorable that we think you might find intriguing too.
Yeah. So for me, yeah, a shady company tried to steal Graceland. So Graceland is Elvis Presley's mansion in Memphis, Tennessee. Um, it is I found out this while reading the article. The second most visited house in the country, behind the White House. Um, I don't know if it's going to continue doing that. I don't know what their attendance kind of figures are, but it is a house that is built for you to go tour through. And we had somebody come and talk to WVU about it. She had an internship down there, and she said it was still owned by the family. So they couldn't build anything permanent on inside the house because the family still wanted to be able to come in and live there if they so choose. So you have, and it's one of the few museums that I know of. I was talking with Jake beforehand, and maybe you all know a different one, that the subject matter of the museum was alive enough to give you a tour or did a tour of the house while they were still alive so you can listen to them discuss it. The other one, still being alive, is Jimmy Carter and Jimmy Carter National Historic Site, but Graceland is the other one. Elvis did a tour on a TV network, and they used that with his songs to kind of give you a narration as you walk through the house. But back to the story. A shady company said that Lisa Marie Presley, who passed away last year, took out a loan from them for $3.8 million and put Graceland up as collateral. So the company tried to sell Graceland by putting it up for auction, but Elvis's granddaughter basically sued the company and said they were fraudulent. And more digging turned out that the company's phone number no longer is connected to anything. The representative for the company didn't show up to the court date, and the company is not listed as ever being created. So what they think happened was this company made a fraudulent notary kind of agreement using Lisa Marie Presley's signature to then go and say that that is the basis for them calling this loan. They actually called the notary, and of course, it's a Florida company. I don't want to sterilize against Florida, but this is the most Florida thing ever. They called the notary who is from Florida and said, "Hey, do you ever remember signing this?" And I believe it was she. She said, "No, I never signed anything with Lisa Marie Presley's signature." So once that got out to the press, and once the first article kind of popped up on that, this shady company, which the name of it is Nasserani Investments and Private Lending, basically ceased all operations and said, "Yep, nope, never mind. We don't want it anymore. Don't call us. Goodbye." And sent like a very, very poorly written, grammatically incorrect press release to anybody who kind of asked them about it. So it's the wildest story ever that this company, I mean, for a minute, people thought that they were going to be able to bid on Elvis's home, but now they are not, because the company who put it up there, the company doesn't even exist. So it's just wild to me, and I'm sure there's going to be more reporting. I mean, I read about this morning, so I'm sure there's going to be more reporting on it, because now the FBI is getting involved and wants to talk with Elvis's granddaughter to try to figure out who the heck these guys or girls are. So yeah, wild stuff. But Graceland is not going anywhere. It is still going to be there. So if you love Elvis, or have a grandmother who loves Elvis like I do, you'll be able to take her to Graceland and walk through Elvis's life and see his burial plot and everything Elvis. So yeah,
It's funny. It's funny as you described that, and it's just like, I can already see it's probably already in motion, the HBO Max documentary Selling Graceland, and it's going to be a true crime about this fraudulent company and who all these people were. And I'm sure there's probably going to be some I feel like there's probably going to be some indictments coming someone's
Oh,
way as a
yes.
result of this.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think saying, never mind, don't contact us anymore works for the FBI.
Yes. As I'm flying to somewhere without an extradition treaty to the United States. Hello,
Yeah.
Ecuador.
Hello, Ecuador. Good to see you. I don't know if Elvis ever did a concert in Ecuador, but there's the connection there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But Jake, how
Uh,
about you? What is your postscript for the week?
yeah. So for me, it is just a lovely long weekend trip to San Juan, Puerto Rico. My wife and I went to San Juan this past weekend and just had an amazing experience. I'll be honest, I'd never really thought about going to Puerto Rico, to San Juan, didn't know much about it. But the opportunity came up and we went, and it was just an amazing city. We spent most of our time in Old San Juan, which for those listeners who are like very much into Puerto Rico and visiting, we are aware that there is much more to do in Puerto Rico than just be in Old San Juan, which is considered to be more of the touristy area where the cruise ships dock. But for 3 days, we had just a great experience. We stayed in a historic hotel. It was a convent dating back to the 1600s, across the street from the second oldest Catholic church in the Americas that was built in the 1540s. So much history in such a small place with centuries and centuries of history, and got to explore the Spanish forts, San Cristobal and El Moro there that are preserved by the National Park Service. Amazing experiences there, but just an amazing place, and one that I look forward to going back to explore more of the, especially the natural wonders that they have in Puerto Rico, the rainforest there, more of the beaches, and to learn more about the culture of Puerto Rico as well, and a little bit of the legacy of Spanish colonization as well as American colonization post Spanish American War as well. And I am excited to say that I have some video content that I'm working on based around some of the places that we visited on that trip. So coming to a YouTube channel near you in the near future. I say near future in air quotes because as soon as I have some time to edit that video together. So could be tomorrow, could be next week, could be a month from now. So just stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned soon. And also, the photos from this trip that Jake had posted are absolutely stunning, and I'm super jealous. That looks so much fun. It looked like it was so much fun.
Yeah, I will say it's a very accessible destination. It is an American territory, so y'all don't need a passport to go there. And it is especially from here in the DC capital region area. You got some direct flights there out of BWI, so it's pretty inexpensive, relatively speaking, to go to the Caribbean. Relatively inexpensive to get there, and just a very cool place within kind of within the United States that I think more people should visit. More people should learn more about Puerto Rico, its history, and go and experience it. It's a really great place. I can't wait to go back.
That's super cool. Well, that wraps up another history. Good Lord. Another episode of Public History with Jake and Justin. Thank you all for joining as we handed out our museum superlatives and shared some of our more recent memorable moments in the postscript. Please let us know your museum superlatives. If we forgot anything, if you guys think of anything, if you think, oh, yeah, I've been to that museum and I agree, or no, you guys got that completely wrong, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And also, throw in your favorite museums down at the bottom for other folks to kind of see. That way we can kind of get a group going of cool museums to go visit throughout the country. So if you had as much fun as we did talking, consider showing your support by rating and reviewing our show on your favorite podcast platform. Jake, I am done with talking tonight.
It's been a long day.
It's been a very long day. But yeah, share it around. Hoping to get more public history historians on here. So I already have some friends of mine here text me who are saying they're listening. So thank you all. And yeah, just Jake and I have always said, it's just a pleasure to do this and we're having fun. So we're glad that even a few of you guys stick around and listen to us jabber on about all this fun stuff. So until next time, I am Jake, and God,
Are you
just,
Jake?
you know what? Just end it. Just end it. Just end it. How about that? You get the final send off. I'm going to retire. That's it. No more. It's been a long day.
Yep. All right. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.